your mission, should you choose to accept it.
It's a quest! It's a quest for fun!
Well, The Rock says, why don't we just cut right to the chase?
Okay, now he wants to get together. Well, he wants to talk.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
It's showtime, folks!
What are you?
I'm...
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to And I Quote, the weekly show where we introduce you to content creators of all shapes and sizes that join us from many and all corners of the nerd universe. We take your questions and promote their projects. I am your host, Ryan of Nerd Culture, and our guest this week is comic book writer and artist extraordinaire. Some would say, arguably, he's a legend. Please welcome Stuart Sayger. Stuart, welcome to the program. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. Thanks so much for having me. How are you?
I am doing well, good sir, and thank you so much for being here. Now, if you have any questions for Stuart as we go throughout the course of this show, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the live chat. Our producers are going to be keeping an eye on that as we roll out with the show, I should say. Boy, do I have a way with words today or what? So with that being said, let's take a step back here just for a moment here, Stuart. How were you specifically introduced to the world of comics?
Let's see. So I've got an older sister, and she read some comic books when she was little, and I can remember from time to time, probably when I was 3 or 4 years old, I would see my sister get a comic book, and you know, when your older sibling gets something, you want something. And I honestly think that my first couple comics came just because I thought, hey, where's mine? You know, I don't even know what it is, but I want one. But I can tell you, I think some of my first comics I ever got were Charlton Popeye comic books. How about that?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's going way back.
I mean, I was a tot. I was very, very little. My sister used to read Uncle Scrooge and occasionally Little Lulu. I'm not kidding. But I remember Batman was where I really responded to. I think my grandfather got my first superhero comic for me. It was a Spider-Man book, and that was fine. But Batman really grabbed me, and it was Jim Aparo. And my parents were antique dealers, and so I'd go around to a lot of antique shows and things like that. And you could get not old comic books, but comic books that weren't brand new for actually a little bit less than brand new comics. So I actually kind of grew up reading Neil Adams Batman comics as a little tot.
That is amazing. A wonderful piece of history right there. There's no question. That actually segues into my next question. Following that, what would you say were some of your favorite comic book writers or artists growing up?
So I always like when people ask what creators an active creator likes from when they were little. I always want to know what are the things that got the hook in the mouth.
Sure.
I really was more of a DC guy than a Marvel guy. I know that I was, and Batman was my favorite, but obviously Jim Aparo was there. I can tell you, I remember I was absolutely brokenhearted when I had to admit that Micronauts, drawn by Michael Golden, was an awesome comic book because I was such a DC loyalist. I couldn't deny how much I liked the Micronauts book. Brave and the Bold was my favorite book growing up, mainly because I got Batman, and then you got a second DC character, often somebody I didn't know who it was. You know, I knew who Superman was. He had his own book. They didn't put him in there that often, but you'd get like Black Lightning or Red Tornado. You know, each issue of that was sort of a nice standalone story, which when you're little, that helps. But as I got older, I found more and more titles, and by the time I was 13, I actually started working for a comic book store in my hometown, and so then you get a lot more comic books in a hurry.
I would venture to say so. When you're working in Nerd Central, which one of those places happens to be known as a local comic shop, that tends to help a lot with your nerdom being grown and blossoming and all that kind of jazz. So there's no question about that. What would you say are some of your favorite comic book based movies or TV series, past or present?
So I will tell you what, I think there's this time. First of all, I always wrestle with this question because what are the boundaries of comic book based? Like, to me, the original Star Wars movie is basically a comic book movie. I mean, it's got a lot of the same elements. You know, the heroes are dialed up. No villain is more dialed up than Darth Vader. But to stick to like the core question material that are movies or TVs that are from comics. Well, I grew up a 1966 Batman fan, and I will always love that. Okay, let's start with that. I like, and again, because I'm a Batman person, I like the Batman animated series. But honestly, of all of it, my favorite anything is probably Justice League Unlimited. And I think I like Justice League Unlimited because I think the writing in it was so good. They had a lot of characters to deal with. They got so many of them right. If you've never seen them, I talked to so many people. I'm surprised you haven't seen all those episodes. The long going storyline with Hawk Girl, which you wouldn't expect to be, you know, a great linchpin, was such a great story with a real punch at the end of the season. And to be honest, I'm kind of a fan of some things that aren't exactly comic book movies, but are kind of close. Like I like Tarzan, Legend of Greystoke.
Yeah.
That came out when I was little, and I saw that with my grandmother. And you know, Tarzan is one of those things that if you're my generation, everybody kind of knew of it, but there weren't active comic books being made of it, and there weren't TV shows, and it was sort of, it's that guy who swings in the trees. But finally, to have his full story presented of this thing that was sort of vaguely in my life was really cool. It's like, oh, this is what, you know, these older people are talking about. Yeah.
Excellent stuff, man. I'm sensing a pattern here. You mentioned Batman, you mentioned Justice League Unlimited. I'm sensing a pattern here with the DC universe. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Once again, we're talking with comic writer and artist Stuart Sayger on this episode of And I Quote. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're happy that you're here. Make sure you like and share this video with all 200 of your closest friends. They're going to like the way they look after watching or listening to this episode of And I Quote. I guarantee it. If you have any questions for Stuart as we go throughout the course of this show, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the live chat. We want to hear from you, and we look forward to hearing from you as we proceed with this incredible, extraordinary person who's got stories for days already with the DC universe. I'm just saying. Before I go on to something else, I'm going to just real quick sidebar with regards to something known as Justice League Unlimited. Have you read the trade paperback that was released a couple months ago called Justice League Infinity, which picks up after the events of Justice League Unlimited?
I've never even heard of this, but now I have to get it. What is it, really?
Yes, it's called Justice League Infinity, and it is a continuation of the Justice League Unlimited television series.
Okay, then I've got to get that. No, I have no idea, and I'm not joking.
Okay, that's okay.
You know, I will tell you, it is amazing how easy it is for me to miss some things. I work in this industry. I draw the stuff all day, and very often, if the day is done, I'll want a break. I'll want to do something that's different. You know, even if you know, I haven't drawn Batman in a long time, but if I've been drawing, I don't know, Dejah Thoris or Evil Ernie or something else I've been working on, sometimes I just want, you know, an entirely different flavor when I'm going to read something or watch a movie. But if that's out there, I have to get that.
Yeah.
So thanks. I will definitely look that up.
You're quite welcome. I just bought the trade paperback at my local comic shop a few weeks ago, and I'm very much looking forward to reading it. I haven't read it as of yet, but someone recommended it. I mean, I sort of knew it was already out there, but I didn't really give it too much thought until someone recommended it to me, and I thought, I'm going to have to check this out because I am a big fan of the Justice League / Justice League Unlimited animated series. Now, granted, I didn't watch it until years later on streaming services, but when I finally caught up on it, I thought, wow, this series is darn good because there's so many different characters that I never heard of or I'm not familiar with it. I got a little bit of a piece. I was learning as I was going along within the series itself, and I have Justice League Unlimited on Blu-ray. I'm not ashamed to say it. What's up, DC fans? Just saying. Not that we're trying to show any bias here, because there is no bias. There is room for every fandom and every universe that we're in. I mean, we're in Earth 1, just so we're clear. But either way, it's good stuff, so feel free to check that out. So my next one for you is, when did you specifically decide to become a comic book writer and artist yourself?
I think the big thing, if I had to say this is a line in the sand, it's probably just about the time I graduated college. You know, it's easy to go to school and say, well, all I have to do is get my good grades and go through next year. But at some point, you run out of years. And I remember thinking, what do I want to do when I'm done? I studied journalism. I went to Indiana University, and I had this background working in the comic shop. My parents, as I said, were antique dealers. They liked art. I drew for my college newspaper, you know, not daily, but almost. And then when it came time to graduate, and I said, well, what do I want to do next? You know, I kind of had this attitude of, well, you're going to have to get a job. That's not going to be a lot of fun. But before you have to do that, this is kind of my last chance to do anything crazy, right? And I said, well, why don't you try making a comic book? You know, I had the background from the comic shop. I had a background in writing thanks to journalism. I'd been drawing for my paper. I kind of felt like, I don't think there's anything I can't do here. The truth is, before I've self-published a comic book, I was thinking about trying to break into the industry, and I made some sample pages. Did some I did a lot of things wrong. Okay, so like I made Batman sample pages, that was fine, but I kept making sample pages of things that I thought was interesting. Like most people would make Spider-Man, Captain America, X-Men, and I made like Witching Hour. Witching Hour, DC hadn't had a horror title of the Witching Hour for decades. I made The Shadow. I kept wanting to draw these characters that were kind of dark, right? And I also kind of felt like this was at a time when everybody was doing this sort of Jim Lee X-Men kind of stuff, and I didn't draw like that. So if you can see my art back here, it's a little bit darker, a little bit more gritty. I wanted to make something that the subject matter fit my visual style anyway. But I went to the Chicago Comic-Con. I don't know when this was, around 2000 or so. And I had these sample packets, and I would get nice reviews, but nobody hired me. And I remember even Bob Schreck, who was had recently been hired at DC, he was editing Green Lantern and soon got Batman. He liked my stuff, but he also just said, let me see what you do next, which is what a lot of editors do. They want to see if you can turn out pages quickly and regularly. And so I thought, I've made enough sample pages. I mean, I've kind of felt like if I'm going to put all this work into making these samples, why don't I just make something that I own that I can publish? And that's when I had that idea to make a creator-owned comic book called Shiver in the Dark, which actually just had its 20th anniversary. I'll show you. I did a Kickstarter for it. This is the 20th anniversary Kickstarter edition that came out earlier this year.
Oh, brilliant.
But so what I did was I literally was walking around that comic book convention, and I made up my mind. I said, I'm going to be back here next year, but I'm going to be back here with the full finished comic book. I'm not going to bring Xerox. It's not going to have samples. It's going to have something for sale.
Yeah.
So the show ended. I went back home, and the next day, like the Monday after the show, I picked up the phone and I called Brenda Cook, who was the woman at Wizard who ran the show. And I said, hey, I'd like to buy a table for your show. And she said, you're too late, kid. The show was last week. And she kind of had this kind of Eastern New York kind of way of speaking. And I said, well, no, I want to sign up for next year. And she was rather surprised. But, I had walked around the show and I said, if I'm going to do it, what table spot do I want? And I wrote down numbers. And so I bought the table and I hung up the phone and I said, all right, I got 364 days to make a comic book. And I used about 362 of them. But I got the thing done. And so the next year, there's a photo of me. I'm rolling up my sleeves 15 minutes before the show opens. I just got my table set up and it was just kind of like, here goes nothing. But I remember one thing that was interesting about it was I thought, I hope I can sell the book. It did better than I thought it would. I'm being perfectly honest. But I thought at the very least, all those people who I had been giving a sample packet to, if it was an editor, I could say, now I've made a finished book. I kind of felt like I was really putting my money where my mouth is. And interestingly enough, I happened to run into Bob Schreck again. And I said, hey, you told me last year, show you what I'm doing next. And here it is. And he took it home and he called me from the DC offices a couple of months later. And he was very cool. He went through it page by page, panel by panel, talking about what he liked and what he didn't. And then, and I stayed in touch with him. And a couple of years later, when he was at IDW, he just called me up. He was an editor there. And he said, I got a couple new projects. I think your stuff's great. It's really evolved. You can pick. What do you want? And he just read them off to me. And so I did a Dracula series for him. But that was it. I mean, those seeds get planted. And it's like people talk about, like, how do you break into this industry? It's this old joke. I don't know if there's really this breaking in, but when it happens, you usually feel like you're about ready for it. And you look back and you say, well, I did lay the groundwork to make it happen.
I would venture to say so. And that is an amazing story. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. And congratulations, too, because you had an idea. Someone told you, you got to, if you want to get a table, show me your stuff. You got to, and you learned, you improved your craft. You came up with a story that you were passionate about, that you wanted to put out there for people to read. And you rolled up your sleeves figuratively and literally. You said, all right, let's get my hands dirty. I'm going to dig in. I'm going to do this as best I can. And I'm going to deliver the best comic I can put out to the best of my ability, of course. And you did it. And that is true. And you said it, you said 362 out of 364 days. That is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but that's dedication. That is respect. That is loyalty to your projects and your passion. So
the funny part about it,
I can't literally do this right now, but my hat's off to you, kind sir. Because that is
funny. The funny part about it was, I remember, if you've never made a whole comic book,
sure, yeah,
it's a big thing to bite one off. And I can remember I had like 2 pages to draw of the book and 2 weeks to get them done. And that's a ton of time now. Like I've had people say, I need 2 pages in, before dinner time. But at the time I remember thinking, gosh, can I get 2 pages done in 2 weeks? And it was just silly. But the funny thing about it was I came out with first issue, then a year later I had the second and the third, and about the time that I started to get this fan base, and I said, wow, people are buying my book. I don't need to be hired. That was about the time that I got offered jobs from DC and Wizard and Warner Brothers. And it was almost like this lovely bittersweet. I ended up drawing, if depending on the age of your fans, they might know this book. I drew the Lego Bionicle comic book for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this was sort of the book that unfortunately put this one on hold. It was a great job. I loved it. I did it for 2 years. It really kind of changed my life. And I went from doing, my self-published thing, which I could, get done and polish and make it as good as I could do it whenever I got it done, to you've got a deadline.
Yeah.
I'm not writing it. I wasn't coloring it. I wasn't lettering it. But this was suddenly where this traditional comic book framework was dropped on me. It's like, if you can't do this much per month, then you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just a different mindset, because before I was just making the best possible pages I could. When it got done, that's when it got done. So you also learn to draw with speed. You can learn discipline of how to draw when you're maybe not quite as inspired. Mm-hmm. I cut my teeth on Lego Bionicle. Jay Gardner, if you're listening, you were my first editor. You were very patient.
Very well. Yeah. Well, a wise person once said, "Patience is a virtue." Once again, we're talking with comic book writer and artist Stuart Sayger here on this episode of And I Quote. Make sure you like and share this video with all 300 of your closest friends. They're going to like the way they look after watching or listening to this episode of And I Quote. I guarantee it. Let us know if you have any questions for Stuart in the comments and live chat as we go throughout the course of the show. Amazing stuff up to this point. What would you say are some of the rewards about being a comic book writer or artist?
So for most of us, the big thing is, I'm putting words in all the other comic book writers and artists' mouths out there, but I'll bet they agree with this. Most of us are doing this because this is something we wanted to. We pursued it. It's kind of hard to get in. It takes a specific skill. I know some people have got some careers where they said, I never meant to be this. I kind of fell into it. Maybe I needed a job out of college and I knew somebody, and then they stayed with it for years and years. This takes a different kind of investment. I mean, if nothing else, the way that I got into it was I had to go to that Chicago show several times. I mean, I had to make the book. There wasn't, hey, can I have an application? I think the best thing is I'm doing something that I picked and I really, really like. But the other thing is, a very good friend of mine is a commercial illustrator who does a lot of work for the pharmaceutical industry. And that is a business, an illustrator who makes a good living, but he never gets to sign his name to anything. And he never gets to put much of himself in the work. He told me he can work on a project for, literally a couple months. And when it's done, have the editor say, got it, thanks. And that's it. And he said, when he saw me at a comic book convention, he said, people come up and they tell you why they like your work or what they want. He said, I've never been asked to sign anything in my life. I've never had anybody ever ask me, hey, why did you do this instead of this? And some of it is, if you're working on, an antacid or something, that you're not going to meet your audience in the same way. But ultimately, I get to make something that makes people happy. If I'm at a comic book convention, anybody who comes to see me, I'm their hobby. They're in a good mood. And that's really kind of nice. And I guess the last thing I can say that's kind of great about it is nearly everybody, and these days almost virtually anybody who makes comic books for a living, they at one time in their life, they were absolutely a fan. And so it's awfully fun for me to look back. And I mentioned Micronauts. Yeah. That was one of my favorite comics when I was little. I know Michael Golden now. I've had dinner with Michael Golden. We can talk art. He's a colleague. Neil Adams was my hero growing up, and I can, more than once I had dinner with Neil. I can remember, being in a rush, and he's like, well, let's share a cab. And it's like, that was the guy who made me want to learn to draw. We're going to go share a cab. So, that's kind of cool. I'm a bit of a sports fan, and it's always fun when you hear these guys talk about being in high school and admiring a player in the NBA. And then later that person can be their teammate or their adversary. and how it is to sort of, you know, deal with being on very different playing fields to suddenly, you know, eye to eye with the person. Comic book people get to do that.
That is very true. And life is better when reading comic books, as far as I'm concerned. On the flip side of the coin, though, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges of being a comic book writer or artist?
You need a really broad skill set these days. You know, most of us were all self-employed, so you have to be good with your finances, have to be good with your time management, have to know how to do taxes. Technology is a thing that we have to keep up with. You know, a lot of times now, if you draw comic books and you don't know how to use a computer, I mean, I don't care if you can draw like Rembrandt. I don't think you can work in the industry. There's a cartoonist named Doug Snade who's really skilled and does a lot of illustrations with this aniline dyes, and he was looking at a Catwoman piece I made where I had colored it in Photoshop, and he was asking me how I did some of my lighting effects on the flesh, and I told him, and he said, oh, he was 83, and he asked me, and he said, Photoshop, is that a computer program? And I said, yeah. And he said, so I'm gonna have to get a computer. And I thought, Doug, you know, you're 83, you've got a great thing going on, this is not for you. You know what I mean? But there was a time when I can remember a lot of people were getting into the industry and Photoshop was kind of new, and there were those who knew how to use it and those who didn't, and those who knew how to engage in social media and those who didn't. And this hobby or this industry really has embraced the idea that this is a hobby. I mean, this live feed we're doing right now is an integral part of the hobby, right? If I can't get on StreamYard, then we can't do this. I would say that's probably the hardest part, is that you have to be a taxman, a technician, an artist, you know, a little bit of a salesman, you know, get out there and meet the fans and be approachable. That's a big deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would totally agree with that. Well said, kind sir. Now, a few things I would like to share with you, and for those who may be listening to this, I'll describe it to you as we're bringing it up. You've put your own spin on certain characters as well as your own stories. Before we get to that, I want to take a step back here. We're looking at Marvel for a second. This is something you've done of the character known as Gambit, the Raging Cajun from X-Men. I'm just curious, how long did it take you to put this image or this print, this however you want to call it, of Gambit together? How did this all come about?
So this is where this is always strange for me. So I draw pretty quickly. I color slowly. Most people can color a lot faster than I can, although I'm getting a lot faster at it. Amazingly, this piece was a commission for a fan at a Pittsburgh Comic-Con. It was and as I'd mentioned, I'm a bit of a Neil Adams fan, and if you know his artwork and you see that hand, you know what I'm talking about. That wasn't terribly tough. The coloring always takes me a little bit longer, but I'll bet I drew that whole thing in black and white form in about an hour and a half. And then I think it probably took me about 4 hours to color, and it probably shouldn't have taken me that long now that I'm looking at it, but I did it a while back. And I know that some of the lighting effects there were kind of new to me, and I was experimenting with some different features in Photoshop and stuff that I wasn't familiar with. It came out well, and this is the one thing I will tell everybody. Most editors, you know, they don't know how long you really have to spend on something, and they don't care. Can you get it done on time? That's what matters. Does it look good? If you have those two things meet, the rest is gravy. But I'm actually these days particularly drawing in black and white very fast. And one of the things that actually helps or hurts depending on who you are, I often don't make things in strict line art, so I'll layer my whites and blacks on top of each other in opaque media. So I'll use ink and maybe an acrylic white and some more black ink on top of it, and you get some greater depth and atmosphere that way. But it can make it a little bit difficult for digital colors, because like particularly on the Batman piece behind me, his head, there aren't really hard black outlines on that. You're not going to be able to come in and just magically select issue or areas. It's a little slower to color when you draw it that way, but I would argue the proof's in the pudding. What does the final piece look like?
Yeah, and this looks electrifying, I might add.
I like
I've seen Gambit before, but Gambit has never. I mean, he looks darn good in this image here for sure. And another character I'd like to draw your attention to, because this character blew up the internet several months back with his original series on Disney Plus. # not a sponsor. Moon Knight.
There he is,
so
Moon Knight.
What was it like putting this piece together for Moon Knight?
Amazingly, this was another commission. However, the original piece for this didn't have sort of his bottom leg in the building for it. So it's kind of weird. I had the commission I did for somebody. I got a scan of it, and I thought, I'd like to round that image out, because I think it was drawn on 11 by 14 paper, and this one was 11 by 17. So I had to add some of the building and such. Moon Knight is a funny character because I'm a Batman guy, and Marvel has Moon Knight, and he's very similar. And I always kind of remind myself, it's like when I draw something, I try not to dwell too much on what something quote unquote looks like in a physical sense. I try to draw what it feels like emotionally. Moon Knight should look like he's kind of mysterious, that he's outside, that it is nighttime, that it is dark, and he wears a hood obscuring his entire face. And so there's the thing I always wrestle with is how much do you show and how much do you sort of obscure and make the viewer have to sort of fill in. This one was also colored on Photoshop, and the big thing I can say about this, it's really special, is you see on the very left side of the page there's a big bolt of lightning that comes down.
Oh yes,
that is the light source. That is the light that dictates everything. And frankly, if Moon Knight were crouched on a building like that and there's lightning behind him, he would just be a black silhouette. Now, we don't want a black silhouette. We want to be able to see the character. So the difficult thing about this is how to show all the detail in the figure and also make that light look convincing, look believable. I always tell everybody, really good art doesn't need to be realistic. It needs to be convincing. It's trying to say and do something. You need to bring the reader along with you. And so I think that finding the parts that are still highlights on that and letting that lightning be light, that was the challenge on that.
I mean, it still came out incredibly well. I mean, for someone who's not overly familiar with Moon Knight, I mean, just looking at this, I'm thinking this is definitely going to stand out from the other things or other artists that have put their own spin on the character known as Moon Knight for whatever reason. And that's fine because everyone has their own unique style, their unique attitudes and approach towards things. Not that there's anything wrong with it because all art is subjective anyway. Well, we mentioned Marvel. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want to tell you a funny Moon Knight story related to this. You'll like this. So as I'd mentioned, I'd grown up a Batman fan. When I was 10 years old, I went to a little comic book convention in Indianapolis, and I was there looking for Neil Adams comics. And I was talking to I was 10, I was in 4th grade. There was a comic book dealer who said, kid, seems like you like drawing. And I said, yeah. And he said, and you like Neil Adams? He said, there's a guy here who draws a lot like Neil Adams. You should go check him out. And I said, okay, who's this? And Bill Sienkiewicz was there, and he was working on Moon Knight. Okay. So I go over and I meet Bill, who's a huge influence on my work, but I meet him when I'm 10. And I walk over and he's drawing Wolverine, and he's got about 3 or 4 people watching him draw. And I look over and he's answering questions, and I'm little and it's kind of hard to talk to an adult. And I said, what are you drawing? And he shows and he says, he kind of tips to me, he said, I'm drawing Wolverine. And I thought, that's some Marvel thing. I don't care about that. And I just, I left. I was a kid. I was after Batman. That was my chance. That was my chance to interact with this guy who, would be one of my heroes. And I just was like, I don't even know what he's doing. The Wolverine.
I'm not really drinking the Marvel Kool-Aid today. I'm more of a DC fan. Sorry, we're moving on.
Now, I remember the funny thing was I didn't really know who the X-Men were. I didn't. Well, it's 10. I'm 10. You don't know all these things, but I got a John Byrne X-Men not too far after that, and I remember actually my mom picked it up for me. She thought the art was good. You're really lucky when you have parents who'll get you comics and they'll look at the art and try to judge. Like, I think this is what you like, and she was right, and it was well drawn. And then I was kind of again horrified because there was more evidence that Marvel was making awesome comics, and I had to. Get over myself and say, give these guys a chance. And so X-Men and Micronauts were the gateway to being a Marvel fan. Bill Sienkiewicz, it should have been you, and it wasn't.
I guess so, but my goodness. Wow. The things we learn, whether as a child or whether we growing up as an adult, and we look back on it and think, man, what a mistake, or maybe a positive choice that was. I'm not sure. It depends on the person, depends on the situation, because regardless. But you mentioned Marvel, you mentioned DC, you mentioned some of the other properties, but something that you specifically came up with yourself, Shiver in the Dark.
Yeah.
What exactly is Shiver in the Dark, and how did this all come about for you?
So this is, as I mentioned, this is my self-published comic book, and this comes really right after the heels of me sort of making some sample pages and trying to get hired by Marvel and DC. And I can tell you, if you're a young artist and you're trying to break into this industry, particularly if you're making samples, so these days there are a lot more independent books. When I was growing up, there just weren't that many. You know, if you had your Marvel and DCs, and there might be, you know, something that was a fringe, you might have seen a Vampirella or a Heavy Metal here or there, but there really seemed to be like these really well-established characters, and then nothing else. There's like the fan and these big companies. But so when I had the idea to make my self-published comic book, this was sort of a really, really big jump in my growth, in that prior to making this, if you're making sample pages, typically you pick the character you want to draw, and then, at least I did this, you have a mental Rolodex of what it would look like. Like if I said I was going to do Batman, I probably was kind of channeling Neil Adams, because that's what Batman looked like to me. That was my mental image for it. If I were going to do, you know, X-Men, I probably would have done something that was like John Byrne related. So when I decided I wanted to do my own thing, I sort of was hatching the story, and I knew I wanted to do something horror related. I already told you I did Witching Hour sample pages, but I was also kind of want to do like a romance comic. And that might sound kind of odd, but you know, my sister owns a vintage clothing store in Louisville, Kentucky, and I actually kind of thought, what would be like two fun tastes that I could mash together. Like I thought I could have really good characterization if it was about like someone who was of a dating age, but it had this really strong horror background. And so there really was this idea, at least I felt this way. I don't know if it was this way, but I felt like I was making something that didn't exist. So whatever it was something I was creating. I wasn't marching in someone else's shoes, measuring myself against something else. It was just internally what felt good and what felt right. And I had the idea for the story, and then it came time to draw it. And I can remember, this sounds silly, but I sat at the table and I was about to start drawing, and I thought, well, wait a minute, I don't even know what any of this looks like yet. Like, I didn't have model sheets, and then even if I did, I didn't have a plan for what was the specific look of the book. And I thought, well, you know, I can look at what romance comics typically look like, or I can look what horror comics typically look like, and they don't overlap. And so then I felt like, whatever this thing looks like, that's got to be something you make new. And so I had this moment of clarity, and this is where I say this really was a moment of growth for me, was I said, don't box yourself in. The story is the thing. Whatever's happening in it, what's the best way to illustrate it? That's the technique you should use. So this also happens at a time where I'm really feeling like I want to try new things. So I made the rule for myself that whatever is happening in the story, that panel, that moment, pick the art style that reflects it. So I can watercolor, I can use pen and ink, I could use a photo montage if I want. None of it is off limits. And I thought that if the writing of the moment and the visual of the moment fit together, nobody's going to mind that the art style jumps around. In fact, it'll sort of lead them through each beat a little bit better. But when you do that, you start, you know, asking yourself, what do you want this thing to look like all of a sudden? And so there was a part of this book where I literally took like a generic Barbie type doll that I got at a thrift store, and I made a dress for it out of toilet paper. As you can see, she's wearing like almost like these tattered robes on her. And so then I positioned a lamp and held up the doll just right and got some dramatic lighting, took a photo of it, and photoshopped the neck so it was more like human proportions. And then that became a panel. I had a panel where this girl has a flashback to when she's in high school. And I thought, well, how do you draw high school? And so I said, oh, I know, it'll look kind of like an Archie comic. So it was like Dan DeCarlo line art, but I put like deep shadows on it and film grain to make it look like horror and scratchy. And, you know, once people got used to me jumping around, they were like, okay, I'm on, I get it. You know, there are lots of visual cues that I can give somebody, and then let the story sort of just go on top of that. And so truly, I can tell you the 2 or 3 years I made sample pages before Shiver in the Dark, I learned more making the first issue of this than I did probably the 2 or 3 years prior. And some of it was just unlocking the brain. That was all it was.
Wow. That That is something else for sure. So you mentioned it's a bit of heart, maybe a mix of romance. So if you're going to give a real quick elevator pitch for Shiver in the Dark, what would it be?
It's kind of like this. This is my reaction to all the horror movies out there of sweet innocent victim and forces of evil. And I wanted to write a story about the main character who isn't necessarily the chosen one, isn't inherently good. I thought, what happens if you have sort of forces of evil, and instead of having a scared victim, you have the quote unquote victim is somebody who is kind of rotten themselves. They are better prepared to deal with awful or evil people. They even have some of this in them themselves. Do they become a victim, or might they make a better recruit? You know, if you can't beat them, make them join, which is different than join them. That's sort of the crux of the story. I wanted the lead character of this comic book comes from a fairly wealthy, comfortable family, and she's good looking and she's kind of spoiled, and has managed to use some advantages she has in life in a very sort of selfish fashion. That doesn't make you a good person. It often doesn't make your life very rewarding. But I thought this is the kind of person who doesn't normally get their story told. So I wanted to sort of put all these pieces in a blender and shake it. And so that's what this comic book is.
Well, call me intrigued. Stuart Sayger, who we're speaking with here on this episode of And I Quote. Make sure you like and share this video with all 500 of your closest friends. They're going to like the way they look after watching or listening to this episode of And I Quote with Stuart Sayger as our guest. I guarantee it. Make sure if you have any questions, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. We would love to hear from you as we go throughout the course of the program. With that being said, you mentioned this earlier, but any other special memories for you from being at conventions, whether you are there as a vendor or there as an attendee, Stuart?
You know, it's kind of funny. I told you that my parents were antique dealers, so I went to these shows all the time when I was little. And to go there as sort of someone tagging along with your parents, and then sort of going to comic book shows as a fan, and then being behind the table. I think the thing is, it's kind of fun. You can wear all hats. Like every convention I go, I try to spend some time that I'm going to shop and look at some things and try to find something that I want for myself that allows this to be my hobby as well as my profession. And I'll tell you, nearly everybody who's working in this industry, if they, as I said, if I think they start as a fan, if that ever goes away, then I think you're lost. And the reason why I say you're lost is the people who make this stuff, they love it. It's important to them. They care about it. If it ever becomes just a job, you're sunk because your competition is too good. Now, as far as like other memories, I've just gotten to meet so many people I like. I can remember I've met Stan Lee. I remember I met George Perez a couple times. I remember Alan Davis. I'm trying to think of some of the stories. Some of them I can't tell you. There's always a Dragon Con story you can't tell. I can tell you that. What are some really, really good ones? I will tell you some ones that are kind of funny. This isn't exactly what you're asking me about, but I remember I was at a comic book shop in Chicago. I might have been Quimby's.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered I was in there one time, and there was a guy who was reading a comic book like this, and he was kind of looking over at it at me. And I kind of make eye contact with him, like, is there something going on here? I don't know. And he just sort of took the book down and he said, "You're Shiver in the Dark." And I was recognized in a comic shop for a comic book I had made, which was something like I never expected to have happened. And I kind of said, "Yes, I am." But now there's no place for the convention, for the conversation to go other than this guy said, "Well, I like your book." It is, well, I'll tell you one that I liked. I remember there was a gentleman who was a fan of mine, and he had a really bad stroke. And he lost his vision in one of his eyes. Mm-hmm. And he lost some of his muscular control as well. And he told me that he always likes to draw, and he quit drawing. And I thought, that's awful. Like that drove me crazy. And I said, listen, you gotta, I encouraged him. I said, please don't give that up. And his daughter had told me, it's like, I really wish my dad would draw again, but he misses it and he can't do what he used to do. And I just talked to him about it. And I said, nobody draws as well as they want to draw. Right. I mean, even if I make something I think is really good, I wait a week and I feel like I could have done that better. And I said, it's never, like, to me, so much of drawing was never about making the piece, but it's like the journey of making the piece. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I wear glasses now. I didn't used to have to wear magnifiers and things like this. And it's just like we all sort of struggle with all this. And I just kind of encouraged this guy to do it. And the thing that was funny about it was he wrote me about 6 months later and he said, you know what, I'm glad he encouraged me to do that because I'm drawing again and I was ready to quit. And the thing I've told other comic book creators this, and this is small, okay? I'm no rock star. You know, George Lucas has tons of followers. But there are a few people out there, whether you're a big star or a little guy, there are always some people who follow your work. And I remember I was talking to Doug Pankowitz, who does Arsenic Lullabies, and I said, you know, there are people who like your work you'll never meet. And I said, there's a very good chance that you are affecting people you'll never meet in ways you'll never know. Right? And so I said, yeah, never forget who that guy could be. And the funny thing was, like, I talked to this guy's daughter later, and it's kind of like almost talking to like children don't want to be told what to do from their parents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd be like, hey, you should eat your vegetables. If Michael Jordan tells you to eat your vegetables, you eat them. But I kind of felt like all I had to do was say to that guy, you know, don't give up on drawing, just keep doing it. And he wrote me back and he said, that was all I needed to hear. And I gave it another shot. And then he got over the hump. And he kept doing it. And so that is kind of one of those weird things where, and I'm sure I've been on the other end of that conversation where a creator has given me some good advice or some help. I asked Michael Golden when I got the Bionicle job, I said, you drew Micronauts for years. Give me the advice. Tell me what to do, how to do this better. You drew a toy line that people cared about deeply, and they still do. What have I got myself into? And he said, you need to figure out a way to love this. And I said, oh, yeah? Like, I thought love was a strong word. And he said, yeah, because you're going to talk about this the rest of your life. And I said, you're going to do this for however long the job is. It'll be that long. But people are going to come up to you with copies of it for forever. So have it be something that is a good part of your life because it'll echo throughout. And I thought that was really great advice. It also taught me to sort of look at it through the fans' eyes and sort of take on the responsibility that I was going to be the Bionicle guy to these kids, just the way he was the Micronauts guy to me. That was cool. And I'm going off on a wild thought tangent here, but it made me think like Jack Kirby, I think, was at San Diego Comic-Con, and he said something like comic artists are every comic book artist is the teacher of the next wave of comic book artists. That's not his exact quote, but it was something like that. And I think he was kind of getting at it's like you can take illustration, you take whatever, but realistically, this is an insulated, inward-looking thing. And every generation sort of is inspired by the people who came before them and inspires the people after. So if you really have a full life in this, then you wear all the hats.
That is a fair point. Lots of great pearls of wisdom and stories that Stuart Sayger is sharing with us. And my goodness, am I loving every bit of it. And we hope that you are too. With that being said, I want to let you know that this episode of Van Dyke Quote, and every episode of Van Dyke Quote, to be more specific, is indeed powered by Poddex. Now, Poddex are the hottest new tool for podcasters looking to have more meaningful conversations or simply gamify their podcast. What you do is you simply shuffle up, you ask a question, you let the content roll. Get yours today at poddex.com. Make sure you use the promo code RYAN10. That's RYAN10, RYAN10, for 10% off your order. You are not going to want to miss out on that one. I guarantee it. That being said, Stuart Sayger, what was the most memorable class you've ever taken in school or in college?
Age of Rococo Revolutionary and Romanticism painting, art history. John Ciafalo was my professor. John, if you're watching, you really were my best professor. I was studying journalism in college. I didn't take any fine art classes, didn't take any studio classes, but I was nearing the end and somebody said, hey, you need a minor to go with this major you're about to wrap up. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. And so ridiculously, I said, let's add art history. I'm interested in art. Let's do this. So I jumped in the deep end and I signed up for 3 classes with, I didn't even take the basic classes. Like, what sounds interesting? My parents like antiques. I like art. I can do this. So I took this class. It was all about 18th century French art. And that kind of was that really expanded my ability to sort of love art. And I can remember taking some of these art history classes, and I was not a big fan of modern art, like modern art being like Impressionist and after. And I remember I had this moment where I said, there's so much of the world who loves this stuff and they say it's great. And I have a choice. I can decide that I really like 16th century art, 17th century art, or I can try to like this stuff that everybody says is great. And unlocking your brain and saying, let's look at it with fresh eyes. Don't judge it by your standard, but judge it by their standard. What are they doing? What are they trying to say? What are they offering you rather than what are you willing to take? And then the art world kind of opened up to me. And honestly, I used to always draw with a very tight style, and I don't much anymore. And it was things like those art history classes and the willingness to say, you don't know everything about art. The whole world has got great ideas. Try to take it all in. But John Ciafalo was my first professor, and he was really good. And he was interested in politics and in discussing the art. He understood like social motivations. Why did this person paint this way? Well, they were trying to pick up girls, which is a reasonable thing to put in there, right? When you consider all these things, you become a better professor. And I remember I had this bad habit. So if you guys ever take art history classes, you can really make your professors uncomfortable. Do this.
Oh boy.
I would go to see all of them in their office hours, and I always ask them the same question. And I said, so you're teaching art history. I said, do you draw or paint at all? And they'd all get uncomfortable. And he was the one who got a little bit uncomfortable. He said, yes. He said, I'm not terribly good at it, but yeah, I like drawing and I like painting. He was the only one who said that. But the fact that he put paint on canvas, the fact that he drew, he had a additional understanding of the work that all the other people didn't have. And I thought that helped him have a greater holistic way of talking about the stuff. And I could kind of tell, I was like, your sensitivities are such that I could tell you're not just looking at art, making it as a different beast. But he asked me, he said, what makes you ask me that? And I said, because I don't think I would study music theory from someone who can't play an instrument. And I said, if I'm going to learn history, I'd like to know that somebody really has a really full rounded view of the whole thing. Like I said, ask your professors that. They will not like that question.
Boy, it's like that jingle we remember when we were younger. The more you know. So with that being said, if you had to lose one of your 5 senses, which one would you give up?
Oh, gosh. Let's see. It can't be touch, can't be sight. So here's the thing. It can't be smell. And the reason it can't be smell is like your sense of smell is really tied to your emotional reactions. And I don't know why I happen to know about this parts of your brain. Like people lose their sense of smell. They often are very, very lonely. They feel as though they can't make personal connections. So I can't lose that.
Right.
So what do I have? So I might choose my hearing. I can't believe I'm saying that.
Okay. That's completely fair.
That's hard.
It's okay. But hey, that's what our good friends at Poddex are here for, to keep you on your toes and give you some challenging questions. Because
it was so smell and taste are the same thing to me. I think they're just too closely tied. I know they're technically not, but as this goes, I'd say they'd have to.
Okay. You're going with hearing on this one. If you had to lose one of the 5 senses, you're choosing hearing in this case, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, which are indeed powered by our good friends at Poddex. What's the first impression you want to give people?
Listen, I got to tell you, that changes by the person.
It's a case by case basis.
Yeah, that really is. That's a loaded question. I come back with a loaded answer, but I would. I'm the kind of person who's much more likely to prepare for each moment. So what's the I don't know. I'd like for them to think I'm sincere.
There you go. That's fair. That's completely fair. It's a good quality to have, is being sincere with yourself and with others. So there's nothing wrong with that. With that being said, what are you superstitious about, if anything?
I don't have much of that. I do believe in luck. Like, not like, I can have good luck or bad luck. I mean, I sometimes, like, you flip a coin, you can't control that. There are certain things that are beyond your control. I don't believe in fate, that sort of thing. I do believe in, preparing yourself, and then you put yourself in a better position to win. You're more likely to win. But I don't have too many superstitions.
That's okay.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. What are some of the ones I'd interacted with? I never had too much of that.
That's okay.
No, that one rolls off me. But I can tell you, I worked for a comic shop. The owner there would not order 13 copies of anything.
Yeah.
That was weird.
Because of the number, yeah.
Yeah, just would not do it. And I just thought, like, you can order 13. And I thought, well, wait a minute. What if they make an A and B cover and you order, 6 and 7? Yeah.
That's
do
true.
that.
When you think about the numbers like that, especially if there are variant covers with certain storylines or certain creative teams that are putting out comics these days, trust me, there's a lot of variant covers in this market of comic books. Just to be more specific, but other than that, I should say, boy, my words. Which activities make you lose track of time?
Oh, I really miss playing Ultimate Frisbee. I would have.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, I played up until, I retired late. But at some point, I kept wondering, is like, these are the money makers, and that hard plastic shell's coming in faster and faster. What activities make me lose time? That. Listen, drawing is one of the very best for that. And I know that's a simple answer given to what we're talking about here. But speaking of Bill Sienkiewicz, he saw a picture I did one time.
Sure.
That I did at San Diego, and he just came up to me and he said, "Hey, that thing you were doing there, do that." And I said, "I know which piece you're talking about." And we got talking. And I said, "So that was a piece I drew like the third day of the show. I had been drawing for a couple hours already. I was warmed up. I was lathered up. I didn't have to do a lot of underdrawing. And I was telling him just how I was in the zone." And he was nodding his head. And I said, that drawing came out so well, and it had no effort to it at all. It was just like I knew exactly what it needed to look like, and it just sort of jumped out of me. When that happens, and it's really hard to hold on to that moment, but time is gone. You're really connecting on such a deep level and an intuitive level that everything else is gone. And I only bring that up because I remember doing that specific drawing, and I thought it was interesting that he keyed on it, because to me, I thought it was a good drawing. It looked fine, but it was effortless. And that was the thing that I thought maybe I would be the only one who would catch. I don't know if he caught that or not, but he saw something in it and made a point of mentioning that drawing to me. And when I was telling him how effortlessly it came out, he kind of rolled his eyes like, "Oh yeah, that's the dream. Yeah, when it happens, it happens."
Well, there you go. I guess you got your second chance to meet up with Bill Sienkiewicz after 10-year-old Stuart didn't know the difference.
Just blew him right off.
Just blew him right. You're like, if it's not DC, I'm not going to drink the Kool-Aid. I'm sorry, it's not happening today.
It was a weird moment though too, okay. And I don't know why I was that way. All I can think of was like, did I was dropped off. I went with my best friend, and maybe it was like, meet us outside in an hour. That's all you've got. And I thought, if I don't shop, I don't get anything. But I don't remember much more than The funny thing about it is the program cover for that book. Yes. Was the Bill Sienkiewicz Moon Knight drawing. I've got the drawing.
Do you?
Yeah, I've got the original drawing. Years later, the comic shop that I ended up working for, they put on that convention, and it was hanging on the wall. And I asked the owner about it, and I said, "Man, I love that drawing if you ever sell it." And I had been a good employee, and he said, "You can have that."
Ooh.
Yeah.
Boy,
so
what good. Nice. Everything kind of came full circle at that point. Excellent.
Yeah, it really did. So I still laugh myself for just like there the guy was in front of me, and just walked right by him.
And you get a chance to meet him years later. Then you get the print, and all of a sudden everything just comes full circle. In this case, wonderful stuff. I got to tell you, great stuff. And we want to take this opportunity specifically to say thank you to Stuart Sayger for being our guest on this particular episode of And I Quote. Make sure you like and share this with all 700 of your closest friends, because they're going to like the way they look after watching or listening to this episode of And I Quote featuring Stuart Sayger. I guarantee it. If you didn't get a chance to ask him during the live portion, if you're watching this on the replay, let us know your thoughts about this podcast. Give us a review in the comments. Let us know what kind of guests you want to see in the future on this show known as And I Quote. Let us know if you have questions for Stuart Sayger. We will put them out. We'll make sure that he receives them so he can answer them to the best of his ability. Other than that, Stuart Sayger, thank you so much for being here. Where can the person watching or listening to this find you on social media?
So there's a plug up above my head here. You can see that. There's my website. But in addition to that, if you just type in my name, you can find me on Facebook or Instagram. I think Whatnot or something like that will be coming up soon. I will tell you this, since we're here for a little plug, in about 2 weeks or so, near the end of the month, I'm going to be on Facebook and for a live show. Dynamite has a new Dejah Thoris series coming out.
Whoa.
And I have made 6 exclusive covers for it, and they're available just for me on my website. And so I think the next big thing that I have coming out is I'll be offering those for sale, and some of them are pretty limited. 3 of the covers have print runs just around 100 copies. And they're genuinely all different. They're not just little logos or paste ups removed. So other than that, come see me on Facebook. I have a regular show there pretty often. I usually give it a little bit of a history lesson on something in comics outside of myself. I often draw in person. This is a cover for Evil Ernie I did. This is the sort of thing that I can draw on there, and I have a camera so you can see my hand on the paper as I do it. And then you also have to endure some kind of dumb, corny jokes as well.
Yes. Listen, none of there's anything wrong with breaking the ice by telling an old school joke, whether it's a new school joke. It doesn't really matter. But Stuart,
a groan is as good as a laugh.
Yeah, that too. There's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, all the links to where you can follow Stuart Sayger are located within the description of this video. And they're currently scrolling across your screen right now, where you can follow him on social media at stuartsayger.com. Wonderful website. Great background to your studio there, Stuart. But you got your Batman back there because I'm Batman. So I dig that. I love that. It's respect. And I thank you again for being with us. We very graciously appreciate it. Once again, my name is Ryan of Neuroculture. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RyanRPM5. Make sure you check out past episodes of And I Quote, and new episodes of And I Quote are on Saturdays, 12 p.m. Eastern time, where we interview content creators of all shapes and sizes. We got so many wonderful things coming your way. We're very, very excited about it. We got people from all walks of life. For instance, next week, we're going to have Tia J is a comedian, and she's going to be on the show with us on Saturday, August the 20th at 12 p.m. Eastern time. That is very exciting. And then the week after that, you get fantasy writer Brian D. Anderson is going to be with us on Saturday. That's August the 27th, 12 p.m. Eastern time. Very much looking forward to speaking with each and every one of our guests. Also, check out our good friends over there at theradbear.com. You're looking for some killer-looking nerd swag from Power Rangers, The Never-Ending Story, anime properties, maybe some DC Marvel properties, what have you. Check them out online at theradbear.com. Use the promo code Ryan10. That's RYAN10, Ryan10 for 10% off your order. You're not going to miss out on that. Also, in a couple of weeks, everyone's been asking, when is your next watch along going to be? I'm going to tell you, it's going to be on Wednesday night, September the 7th. We are going to be celebrating the 15th anniversary of the remake of 3:10 to Yuma, directed by the incredible James Mangold and starring Russell Crowe, Christian Bale, and a host of other great actors and actresses. That's going to be on Wednesday night, September the 7th, 2022, 8 p.m. Eastern time on Facebook and YouTube at It's Neuroculture. Make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, smash that notification bell so you get notified of when our new videos go up. Also, great event coming up in the month of January. This is called the Multiverse Fundraiser, and we're calling it the Ritter Rally. All the proceeds that we donate, that we raise, are going to be donated to John Ritter's the foundation and his family and everything he supported over the course of his incredible life and career. The late, great John Ritter. We're calling it the Ritter Rally in celebration of his memory, January 20th through 22nd, 2023. Go to www.themultiversefundraiser.com. We're going to have celebrity guests. We're going to have panels, and we're going to have giveaways and all kinds of great stuff. And this is the beauty part. This is going to be an online convention. This is a virtual convention that you can join us for free from the comfort of your very own home, January 20th through the 22nd, 2023, the Multiverse Fundraiser, the Ritter Rally. So make sure you check that out. You're not going to miss out on that great event. Great people are putting it together, and we're excited to be a part of it. Absolutely, 100%. So with that being said, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of And I Quote. And remember, life is better when reading. Take a look.
Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
Sweet dreams they placed on me inside my mind. Chance my throat, twist the past, my memories are fading fast.
Join author Gary Zeiger for an animatic short film based on his Breakaway Stingray novel series. Watch this animatic short based on the novel Stingray, You Can't Hide Forever at stingrayseries.com. In Stingray, You Can't Hide Forever, Captain Epsilon is putting the band back together to rescue his protege's little sister from the evil conglomerate, while keeping his state-of-the-art warship, Stingray, out of their hands. Watch as the adventure unfolds in the groundbreaking animatic short at stingrayseries.com. Then, join the crew of Stingray with the next novel in the series, Stingray Prophecy, where Captain Epsilon and Dr. Zubre are pivotal players in an ancient prophecy. Can they reunite the people of two worlds before they destroy each other? To learn more, visit stingrayseries.com.
The original intention of the film was just for my personal use, but I thought, with it being such a unique thing, that I'd like to offer it to anybody who wants to see it. On the first visit, Jack took us into his another room, separate room, and there were these brown parcels full of artwork piled up, and he said to me, "You draw like I do." We were in the studio for 5 hours, you know, it was fantastic, and there's this, he's got this desk, and everything he's ever drawn has come from this desk, and then I would just go with the flow, and that's what this film is about. It's just a unique film of him.
He says, "I beat you." He says, "They say we came in under the dead heat." He says, "That's not true because I beat you." And the American said, "Well," he says, "if you like to think so," he says, "but I know the real story." He says, I know I clearly won that one." See? Well, Joe is 6'3", and I was a run, see, from the Lower East Side. And being Joe's partner was an advantage to me because Joe was believable, you know, they would talk to Joe, and the Goodman brothers would get to know him. Martin Goodman owned Marvel at that time. He went to his mother and he says, "Look, Jackie got a job drawing." He says, "They're paying him for it, they're paying him money for drawing." He says, "Suppose I go with Jackie," he says, "and he says, they'll pay me money." He says, "I'll draw and they'll pay me money." He said, "I'll give the money to you," which we did. We gave it all to our mothers. They called me from Nassau. You know, I lived in Long Island. And they say, "Would you like to come down and draw these guys in training?" I swear, this is not a story. And I said, "Yes, of course, I'd love to come down." And
Good morning! Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.